A stronger day, be your best every day. Hi, I'm Adimus, founder and director of Strengths Optimizer. I aim to help you stay healthy, be happier, and deal with challenges with greater resilience. Are you working in a culturally diverse workplace? Have you heard of mental health shame? And how do you create and turn mental health shame into a health resource? Today, you'll meet Dr. Claude Mayer from South Africa. Claude will show you how to create and sustain workplace mental health in culturally diverse workplaces. Thank you. Hi, I'm Dimas, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. Thank you for watching Strength Optimizer, the Science Up Your Wellbeing series. Today, we have Dr. Claude Mayer joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa. Claude is a professor in industrial and organizational psychology at the University of Johannesburg. She holds 3 doctorates from German and South African institutions and the Vernier Legendary in Psychology, focusing on work, organizational, and cultural psychology. She's also an associate editor for the International Journal of I repeat that again. She's also an associate editor in Frontiers of Psychology, which is in the positive psychology section, and the regional associate editor for the International Journal of Cross-Cultural Management. Her research areas include positive psychology and systems psychodynamics, women in leadership in culturally diverse work contexts, and transcultural mental health and well-being. I'm so grateful to have you today. Claude, how are you doing?
Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm doing very well.
That's good, that's good. Thank you once again for taking your time to share your research and insight into transcultural mental health and well-being, particularly in the context of workplace mental health and shame. Let's get straight right into it. So Claude, one of your research expertise is in existential positive psychology, or commonly known as positive psychology 2.0 or 2.0. So what is positive psychology 2.0, and how does this framework shape your research and your practice?
Yeah, thanks very much. Positive psychology 2.0 is related to the second wave of positive psychology. And as you know, I mean, the first wave started 20 years ago already, and positive psychology 2 has really transformed the first wave of positive psychology. So what we are actually looking at when we are looking at existential positive psychology is that we are going into the existential aspects of living and also of dying. So that means in existential positive psychology, we always look, before we look at the positive side of things and of life and values and attitudes, behaviors, we always look at the pain and the suffering, because we believe that before we can really move to the positive side, we have to look at what is maybe also called the shadow side of our existence. Right. And whilst we are working through the shadow side of our existence and the aspects that might be painful and we might suffering from, we can then transcend that after we've looked at it into the positive and thereby grow and develop our personality.
All right. So it sounds like the existential positive psychology is embracing, if I may use the word, the full spectrum of full experience, a full aspects of human experiences, which include obviously both the things that we are good at, the things that we celebrate, what makes life worth living, but also the inevitable pain, suffering, tribulations, and even death of humans.
Yes, that is true. And we believe that we have to look at life as a holistic approach. And this is why we are looking at both sides. It's got a dualistic approach in sciences.
Thank you. There's a very succinct summary there. Okay. So when it comes to your interest and your research in transcultural mental health and well-being at the workplace. So once again, maybe you can just define for us what is transcultural mental health and well-being at the workplace, and why do they matter?
Yes, I looked for mental health and well-being for a very long time, and I actually realized that a lot of people I was working with, and myself, I'm German by origin, but I'm living and working in South Africa since over 20 years. So I saw that a lot of my clients, but also my research partners, have got a very different approach to mental health and well-being, what it means to them, how they stay healthy and well, and also what is important to them to stay healthy and well. And that it was very much defined not only by their own personality and identity, but also by the cultural and social cultural aspects they were bringing in. So I started to look in the workplaces for aspects that are actually helping people across cultures to stay healthy. And first of all, I used a kind of intercultural approach and looking at the different cultural views on mental health and well-being and how to bring them together in the workplace, also with regard to organizational structures and organizational and leadership approaches. And then I finally realized that we shouldn't look at the differences in approaches, but that we should actually look for the synergies. What really makes people feel healthy and well. And this is why I came to the conclusion we need to look at transcultural mental health concepts and what brings people together to work for the better and the betterment in people and the health within organizations, and find these synopses to really stay healthy across the board and including everybody, no matter what cultural background they are coming from.
Yeah. I think that I must admit that when I first heard the term transcultural mental health and well-being, and the way to explain it is to look at the synergies across cultures, look at what are some of the health and well-being strategies that work across culture. For me, it seems like a huge beast, simply because there's so many cultures and subcultures even across the world. With this, I guess that ambitions, or in your research trying to identify the common themes, like where do you even begin? Because as I said, there's so many diversities.
Yes, you're right. We often use a qualitative research to really go into the depth of the, experience and feelings and also thoughts and thought styles. And what we can see, it's very much related also to the positive psychology to zero movement, that what we can see, everybody experiences pain and suffering and illness and disease in a very difficult way, for example. And but the ways of transforming it into a personal growth and development might differ across cultures. And we are trying to look at how can we actually make the transcendence for everybody to feel at least well and healthy within the organizational context, and look at these existential and human aspects within mental health research. Also, we take the different cultural approaches and we compare them and we offer them to people from other cultures, and we say, oh, would this maybe also be a possibility for you to feel better about this situation? And so it's also a kind of sharing of different approaches based on a cultural origin.
I see, yeah. And I guess that no matter how complicated or how huge the task, they always need a beginning point. And as I said, doing the qualitative research, understanding in depth of individual, perhaps also collective experience, can be a catalyst to increase our understandings of, again, what works, so to speak, across culture. And I think that when you talk about, again, pain, death and dying, suffering, that certainly, absolutely is one of the very common universal experience across cultures. At the end of the day, not trying to be pessimistic, one day we all live and we all die as well.
Yeah, that is correct. And in the in-between, we could see that in transcultural research, we often come across spiritual aspects for mental health and well-being, whilst that is often in Western approaches not so much included in mental health and well-being. It is only a recent movement that we are going more into the spiritual and consciousness research as well. In the Western context, but it has been there in different cultures already for a very long time. So we are also looking at, kind of transcendence and consciousness and how we can actually include this more in Western research as well.
All right. So is there one or two, I don't know whether you call it principles, elements, or strategy from your research and collaboration with others that sort of kind of transcultural mental health and strategy that works so-called across culture?
What we have seen is that in organizations, no matter where we actually go, in Europe or in the African context, a lot of organizations have got a single cultural approach to mental health and well-being, and they have not even, or even the leaders have not really reflected on how could we see it from a different cultural point of view. And this is, I believe, the first step that we have to take in organizations to broaden the mindset and really become aware and create awareness about the different transcultural approaches to mental health and well-being. We can see also in the transcultural setting that people are very open to listen to other cultural approaches than their own, how to stay mentally healthy and well within the organizations. That is also an aspect that we can see, that we are having maybe also to create even more transcultural competences within organizations to include these really very existential and important issues, not only looking at economies maybe, but also looking at our mental health and well-being across cultures.
Yeah, so good. And you did mention that perhaps the first step for a lot of organizational leaders is simply having this awareness and acknowledging that within the organization today, especially, we know that everything is so connected. There are definitely culturally diverse workforce in a lot of organizations. So tapping into that questions, just wondering, so specifically, what can organizational leaders do to create and to sustain a positive workplace mental health in culturally diverse workplaces?
I believe, since we often see in very diverse workplaces that people are not integrated and they don't have a holistic approach to their mental health and well-being, but rather a separated approach, like looking either at physical health and then at mental health. But what leaders can really do is they could foster a holistic approach to being in the workplace and integrating mental health and well-being as an important aspect, and provide spaces to communicate about mental health and well-being. And I believe if this space would be given more in organizations, mental health and well-being would increase. And especially now within the fourth industrial revolution and our COVID-19 times, I believe we really have to look at how to create mental health and well-being in remote workplaces. How really support people who sit far away from each other to support them and open up the communication, and that they can really maintain mental health and well-being, because we have seen it has gone down in many places during the past 1.5 years, and the suffering and pain has increased.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of responsibility for the organizational leaders. I immediately think of perhaps one of their first response is that, but I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I don't have the tools. So what can they do?
I think first of all, they have to change their belief. If they really believe they don't have the resources and what they can do, I think we have to make time and space for it, because otherwise it will fire back one day within the organization if we don't look at mental health from the beginning, and also now urgently, because people will just drop out and suffer more from burnout. So I believe the mindset in leaders has to change, that mental health is actually a foundation of success and achievement, and being really out there in the world and making a difference.
Yeah. So once again, it is the paradigm shift, and I think that the whole COVID-19 certainly has so-called put mental health well-being in the center stage, especially as I said, so many of us, including myself, are working from home, which means that this traditional sense of coexisting in a physical location or an office space has become a luxury for a lot of us. There's a lot of social isolations. As much as technology trying to bridge the gap through, let's say, that an online platform, is still very different from having actually a face-to-face contact, face-to-face presence. And as for me, I'm so-called like a more affectionate person. I like handshake, I like hugs, and all these things all gone right now. I can't do that. Just all this like high five from the screen. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. But But I've also seen that a lot of people believe that the personal contact is very different to the remote contact. But I believe if we can also switch a bit this kind of mindset, it is different. We don't have the touch, but we have still a lot of possibility to communicate. And I also believe that leaders could open more spaces, like, for example, coffee breaks or meetings, just to open up the remote communication more, because we have seen people do not communicate about their private issues and their personal issues anymore, whilst they would have done it being in the office, just having a little coffee together. So I believe we have to open this kind of small talk even in remote workplaces.
Yeah. I still remember those informal coffee chat along the corridor or kitchens. So now it's trying to replicate, as I said, in the online platform. It's still more the dedicated time or space for people to not just talk about work, I guess, because work and personal life, sometimes we like to make a clear distinction, but we're still holistically as one person. And that's also another way of saying that, hey, I actually care about you. And that's I guess it's one very powerful question to ask, and I generally care about one person rather than about the work performance or the bottom line of the company.
Yeah, I believe also here we need a holistic approach to the person.
We're on the same page here then. Thank you. In addition to the high level of stress, anxiety, and depressions happening at the workplace, you also highlighted another important mental health emotion called shame, or mental health shame, which can increase the mental health problems. So what is mental health shame, Claude?
Yeah, we've looked at the emotion of shame within workplaces, and that is actually really uncommon, because a lot of people across different cultures say that they experience a lot of shameful experience during their childhood and in their private lives, but not so much in the workplaces. In the workplace, a lot of people rather speak about embarrassment. However, after we've started our research, more and more people explain to us that there are actually a lot of situations where they experience shame in the workplace. For example, if they feel they don't have the competences to interact with other peoples from different cultures, if they don't have the language abilities, or if their boss has screamed at them or something like that, and they experience deep shame. And often it is not talked about because in many cultures, shame is a taboo topic. So we wanted to look deeper into shame because it is an underlying emotion that impacts, and often impacts unconsciously, on the mental health and well-being of individuals at the workplace. So when we saw that it has an impact, we started to look at how can we transform shame into a positive and growth experience as well. And the first step, again, is becoming aware that we feel ashamed, that we have to address it, that we have to face the shame that we are experiencing. And then after we have dealt with our other maybe negatively experienced emotions like fear of rejection, or anger about the shame, after we have looked at the entire conglomerate of emotions, we can actually try to transform them and ask ourselves, what can we now do with this experience, and how can we use it for our personal growth and well-being? And this is what we mean when we are talking about mental health shame. It's not a kind of toxic shame that stays unaddressed, but it's a shame that we use for transforming into becoming a better person.
Yeah. And you're so right, because regardless of the cultures, shame generally is considered as something that is, as I said, harmful and undesirable. So the concept to even to think that actually we can transform shame into a health resource, into a health asset, certainly, I guess, provides a lot of opportunity for people to tap into this common shame, which a lot of us do not want to acknowledge, but to turn that into, as I said, something that's going to be reflective or even beneficial from the point of view. Is that where your research is heading to?
Yes, that is where it's heading to. And we asked people from over 30 different cultural backgrounds about shame and how do they experience it. And most of them said they experience it as negative. And only actually from one cultural background in Central Africa, people reported that actually shame, in their opinion, can be quite positive as well, because it integrates people. It helps them to adhere to the norms and the values of their communities and gives them a kind of direction. But these were the only individuals that mentioned a positive aspect of shame in itself, and not only after it has been transformed into a personal growth experience.
Yeah. I guess I'm still very much curious just to want to tease out a little bit more. I know that it is a big topic. I know that we don't have all the time to talk about it. But the key word for me, a few times you say that how we can, or how people or different cultural groups can transform this mental health shame into a health resource. So how exactly is that going to work? You talk about they have to acknowledge it and being aware, and then I'm just interested to have a little more, I guess, that examples you may ask.
Sure, it is not so easy to transform it, and it's a very individual also experience. However, after we've looked at it and we are aware of it, we have to ask ourselves questions. For example, to what is the shame related? How does it impact on my behavior? And how would I like to behave? I mean, having had this experience, how can the shame actually help us to become a better person, to become maybe more successful in the workplace, depending on what is the problem related to the shame, and how we can also secure a different way of approaching a situation in future, which might evoke similar emotions, and work with a kind of future-orientated perspective as well. There are different methods and methodologies how to transform the shame. Often, for example, I use symbol working with symbols. We find a symbol for the shame, according to Carl Gustav Jung, one of the psychologists. He did a lot of active imagination exercises, and we can do that with shame. We ask, for example, the client, what kind of symbol do you relate to shame? And then we bring people together talking to the symbol, and also transforming the symbol in their mind as a symbol into something that is more positive. We ask for their associations. We asked to really transform this symbol of shame into something positive and relate it back to how they want to be and how they want to deal with it in a positive way. And this is one possibility. Or the second one, I used to work also a lot with shame experiences in dreams.
Dreams?
So I asked, yes, in dreams. I mean, I've been doing a lot of dream work as well. And we ask them, when they come to therapy or to counseling or consultancy, what kind of dream they had. And often people come and explain that they have had shame experience in their dreams. So we work with this dream and we transform it by talking about the dream and how would they have liked to end the dreaming, feeling better. And then we transfer it back into the real life situation.
Yeah. And I do also want to acknowledge that the two strategy that you have shared with us requires a lot of competency and training and understanding of human behavior. It's not just, okay, tell me about your dream. Okay, tell me about the symbol. And even though you present in a very simplistic way, I also want to acknowledge it. As I said, a lot of work needs to be done behind the scenes, because I'm not advocating anyone just to go outside and say, okay, now I know how to interpret symbols, now I know how to interpret dreams, but it certainly is useful for us, especially for our listeners out there, to have some contextual examples. So thank you for sharing that two examples or two strategies as well. Yeah, especially when it comes to the dream aspect, because I think that I can only speak from my personal experiences. Sometimes the dream seems to have this shame element, or just feeling that inadequate or inferior, or something even relate to some childhood kind of past experience as well. So definitely it's a very useful avenue to explore that further.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, we need a lot of training. It's a several years training to work with these kind of methodologies and methods. But I believe that actually everybody who has got this experience and becomes aware of it could go deeper into self-reflection about shame experience in dreams, and also ask yourself the question, how would this shame actually look and how would I want it to look? I mean, you can approach it in a very simplistic way by yourself as an autodidactical approach, but you can also go very deep from a therapeutic experience. That is true. It has got a big spectrum.
Yeah. So it sounds like perhaps one of the ways of doing that is to perhaps even change. I'm not sure whether I'm using the right word here. The narrative or the shameful experience, or to reframe it from a very perhaps devastating negative experience to something that we can actually leverage, not exactly changing the past, but the way that we actually interpret, associate, experience, observe with the shameful experience.
Yes. I mean, we are using a kind of narrative approach to it whilst we are talking about it, and we are trying to change the narration. I mean, I completely agree with you. And this is how we approach the shame aspect, then making it becoming more a resource for the individuals. It can be a very long experience, and sometimes it can go very quickly. That's also nice. But yes, we are trying to get a resourceful narration out of this transformation.
Yeah. I know that we have been talking about the shames in the context of workplace, but I can't help but think about kids or children, because that seems to be more the common experiences that a lot of children may experience, because either because of their developmental maturity, because of this sense of the violations of the house rules or the school rules. So whether your research also relates to children's type of shame, or is it completely different?
Most of the time I've been looking at adults, and especially in the workplaces. However, you always are drawn back to the childhood experiences, because this is where shame is actually experienced for the first time. And when you're looking at identity development theories like Erikson's theory, I mean, we always see that shame is actually constructed in early years of our development, and sometimes we have to go back. I haven't looked at it really in my own research, but surely it often relates to that, and we then have to go back into the childhood experience and say, what have you experienced, what kind of shame, and how can you actually grow out or expand your childhood reaction to the shame and make it feel like a resource for you now in adulthood. We have to go back sometimes and then transform it through this going back and going forward again.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you, Claude. I ain't got nothing to do about shame or transcultural mental health. I'm just keen to know that, as a positive psychology practitioner, what's one thing that you have been doing this week to look after your own well-being?
That's a good question. Sometimes we forget about it, to look after ourselves. But, every day I take a very long walk. And this is what I've been doing for years. And I walk with my dog and sometimes with my kids. And this is how I look after myself. I take the time for reflection whilst I'm walking. I believe that movement is very important. And also to connect to nature. To connect to my family and my children, and also to my dog. So I believe this connection is important to look after our own health and well-being whilst being in movement.
And just by walking itself, there's so many different layers. And as you mentioned earlier, it's not just about walking. Your walking equals to movement, which you know it is healthy for our physical well-being, but also walking with the dogs, walking with your family means that there's this meaningful connections, observing the nature, engaging with the nature, which we know is also positive factors when it comes to our health and well-being. So there's so many different things by just walking. I am passionate about that because I'm also a big fan of walking as well, and observing the nature. So thank you for highlighting that once again.
Thanks a lot.
No worries. Well, I'm afraid that that's all the time that we have for today. And once again, thank you so much for joining us, Claude. If you want to engage Claude's expertise in transcultural mental health and well-being, I believe that you can contact her via her LinkedIn profile. Is that right? Okay. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
No worries. Once again, thank you for watching. I'm Demas from Strong Optimizer, and we're here to bring out the best in you by optimizing your strengths. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.